left to right announcements. Plenty of time. All right, good evening, y'all. Have several announcements before we begin our class tonight. Welcome to June 22nd, 22. Some health updates. Angela Beck has an appointment with a neurologist on June 27th in Tulsa. Brenda McFarland, neither Jack or Brenda are here tonight. Brenda's neck surgery went well today. She will stay in the hospital overnight. Jack and Brenda appreciate your prayers. Bob Townsend was admitted to the hospital Saturday and released Monday evening. He was examined after a fall and some stroke-like symptoms. The test determined that he was dehydrated, his calcium was low, and he suffered a TIA. He did not have any broken bones from the fall, and he is recovering at home. Janet has an ear infection. She went to the doctor today and is home with that infection. She'll be off tomorrow, so take a note if you need to contact the office to call her cell phone if a prayer request is needed, and she will send it out from home. Birthdays for June, the 22nd, Steve Cook and Kelly Gilliam. The 23rd, Rachel Archer. The 24th, Doug Brannon. June 26th, this guy and Beth Wilson. The 28th, Gerald Walkingstick and Kinley Wilson. Congratulations to Tim and Angela Beck on the June 19th birth of their grandson, Asher Lee Ryan Mobley. He weighed 6 pounds, 2 ounces. Mom, Amber Snodgrass, and baby Asher are both healthy. Amber was released from the hospital yesterday. And, obviously our sympathy goes out to Zane and the family. The funeral service is scheduled for 1 p.m. Friday at the Hayhurst Funeral Home in Broken Arrow. If you'd like to contribute to the funeral expenses, you can give your check with a notation in the memo section or cash with a note to an elder or take it to the church office. Zane is the grandson of Tim and Angela Beck, who are here tonight, and the son of Amber Snodgrass. We have a guest speaker coming this weekend. Kirk Montooth and his wife Emily will be joining us Sunday, but you'll have a chance to meet them Friday night and as well Sunday after services as well. So family game night, June 24th, 5:30 in the fellowship hall. Pizza will be provided, and Kirk and Emily will be here, so come on out and join in that very informal way to get to know somebody. And then, of course, the congregational meal this Sunday after they speak. Ray and Dot May will cater it again with barbecue, and you can see the menu there, and it's always good food and good fellowship after services this Sunday. Men's ministry meeting. Wow. Sunday, June 26th, just before services. A lot going on this weekend. 4 p.m. here in the fellowship hall. The meeting is to build upon the framework that was laid at the men's retreat that was held out at Burnt Cabin a month or so ago. So guys, show up and visit to put some traction on what was discussed out at Burnt Cabin this Sunday at 4. Sunday night devotional, 26, 6 to 8 p.m., grades 6 through 12 at the Walking Sticks home. Bring $3 to cover food and drink. Speaker will be Robbie Walking Stick. You can see Barrett or Thomas for more information if you need that. Soul Sisters, grades 6 through 12 on Monday the 27th at 6 p.m. We'll meet at Miss Janet's house. You'll be cooking and serving a meal. And last announcement, I think, nope, it is not the last announcement. Week from today, Mom's Day Out on Wednesday. Bring your wheels to the church building for your kiddos from 9 until noon, ages 4 to 11, and we'll give the moms a day out for that next Wednesday. July 4th, 6 p.m. at the church building. Sign up at the welcome booth to bring ice cream or toppings. Bring a lawn chair and stay to watch. and as Barrett pointed out, _watch fireworks from the church parking lot. From the school's display, there'll be an inflatable water slide and an obstacle course, so don't bring fireworks here to let them off in the church parking lot. We're going to be observers for the 4th. And then last, our week of Burnt Cabin is July 17th through the 23rd. Grades completed grades 3 through 12. It's our Fort Gibson and Friends Week. Theme is Take Your Stand. Need to turn in your deposit and application to the church office by June the 30th. So that's all the announcements I have. Dan has a song, and Dan is teaching in the auditorium class tonight, and then we'll be led in prayer. Unless you have something.
One announcement. We've been blessed. We have 4 new students at the prison. That brings us up to our 12. That is, if Jesus couldn't do more than 12, I can't do more than 12. But what that does mean is that we are going to need some help with the grading. Let me explain that. Grading those tests out there is a serious thing. I drop them off in the box on Wednesday night. I have to pick them up on Sunday. And then I drop off new tests on Sunday, and I have to pick them up on Wednesday night. So it's a very labor-intensive thing. If you volunteer for that, we do have some that have been helping pick up the slack when we go on vacation or whatever. But it is the responsibility of the grader to make sure that somebody's grading that paper, because I work in a prison, and if I go out there and they're not happy because I didn't bring their test back, I could be a statistic. And so that's how serious this grading thing is. But if you would like to help, we've got 4 students that are going to need at least 2 graders.
You'd open your songbooks to number 753. That's farther along. We had a memorial service this morning for Marvin Rockman, and one of Marvin's favorite songs was this one, Farther Along. Tempted and tried, we're oft made to wonder why it should be thus all the day long, while there are others living about us, never molested, though in the wrong. Farther along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. Faithful till death, said our loving Master. A few more days to labor and wait. Toils of the road will then seem as nothing as we sweep through the beautiful gate. Farther along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all by and by. When we see Jesus coming in glory, when he comes from his home in the sky, then we shall meet him in that bright mansion. We'll understand it all by and by. Farther along, we'll know all about it. Farther along, we'll understand why. Cheer up, my brother, live in the sunshine. We'll understand it all
our gathering to learn more about you and your Son through your word, through our classes tonight. Dear Heavenly Father, strengthen us. Strengthen us through the fellowship we have with one another, through the indwelling of your Spirit, through the word that you've given to us, through the inspired writers, knowing the gift of your Son and the wisdom that you have. Father, too often we are labeled as weak. We are labeled as fearful. We are labeled as ignorant. We are labeled as uneducated. Dear God, you know that that's not true. For we have the courage, the will, and the wisdom to place our trust in you. Father, as we choose to let you be God and let us be the clay, we do ask that you mold us. We ask that you comfort those who are hurting and who don't understand what's going on. But we do know that you are God, and we are blessed to be in this place together in fellowship with one another, with your Son Jesus, in whom we pray. Amen.
Thank you. I recently became the recipient of hearing aids. It's a mixed blessing. It's really weird. I did not know you could hear the razor move over your face as you shave, that you can hear the food crunch in your mouth in ways I never did before. And I thought Thomas had really turned the speaker up loud, and he hadn't. It's just I got my hearing aids in now, and I hear different than I heard before. I can hear myself sing. That is not a pleasant experience for me at all. It's anyway. It's really it is a mixed bag. That's all I can say. But I am grateful I can now hear women's voices a whole lot better than I could before, and that's definitely a mixed blessing. My wife's not here tonight, so I can say that. She's having a little back problem, so she's at home tonight. But we're going to start our actual year in the book, looking at the book tonight. We're going to be in Genesis. And next week, Daryl will be teaching Exodus, okay? And so we're going to start looking at a book a night. Sometimes we may combine a couple of them, try to get through this in a year. But I think it's really important periodically to remind ourselves of what's in the books of the Bible. When you start talking about 66 books, even if you daily read in the Word, there's going to be months where you're not going to look at or think about what's in Habakkuk. Okay, that's life, and that's the way it is. But to have some idea of what's in Habakkuk can at times be very handy. The only way that's going to happen is if you periodically just go over and over that. And so I think it's very appropriate that we take some time to just look at each individual book in the Bible. And so tonight I want us to look at Genesis, and I've got probably 2 hours worth of material to cover in 45 minutes because Genesis is such a seminal book in so many ways. I mean, it is, as we're going to see, it is the book of beginnings, but also it is the narrative that really sets the basis, gives you the background for the rest of the Bible. It's interesting, the Torah, which is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Torah, the law, when you actually look at it, a whole lot of the law is not law, it's story. It's interesting that God saw the need to tell us the story before he gave us the law. Because I think the law needs to be set in the context of story to understand why the law is important. By the time you get to law in Exodus, I'm talking about the delineation of the Ten Commandments in Exodus 20 and so on, you have been told enough story that you know what a mess human beings are. You know what a mess Israel is. And you can begin to see why it's important that God gives us guidelines for how we are to live our lives. And it's not just to control us at all. It is because he knows what is best for us. He knows what we should be doing and shouldn't be doing. And as creator, he certainly has the right to tell his creation what's best for them and how they ought to live. Of course, that's a tremendous rebellious point today, isn't it? Nobody's going to tell me how to live. Nobody's going to tell me what's right and wrong. Well, the Creator knows what's best. And again, Genesis, yeah.
And everything, you guys start at 5 o'clock down here. Just let me know. Thank you, sir.
Okay, let's start looking at some of the material concerning Genesis. I want to begin by giving you several different outlines of the book. There is the traditional Jewish outline that I have up there for you. Basically, it divides it into 4 chunks, and those chunks are very logical. There's the stories about mankind in general, chapters 1 through 11. That brings you up to Abraham, okay? Takes you through the creation, through the first murder, on through the flood, and up to the story of Terah, and so on, and then to Abraham. Chapters 12 through 25:18, that is basically the story of Abraham. 25:19 through 35:29, the story of Jacob. And 37 through 50, the story of Joseph. And if somebody notices that I left out chapter 36, it's because 36 is the generations of Esau, okay? And so it's just kind of in there, but it's not really relevant to that Jewish outline. Now, Dr. G. Campbell Morgan had, I thought, a pretty cool outline, a preacher kind of thing here. You got generation, from chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 25. Then you've got degeneration, sin, chapters 3 through 10. That'll take you through the flood and the Tower of Babel. And then regeneration, chapters 11 through 50. That's when God calls Abraham and the promises begin to be fulfilled concerning what he had said in Genesis 3:15, that through woman's seed all the nations, there will come one who will bruise the head of Satan, who will crush Satan's head, and whose heel will be bruised. So, generation, degeneration, regeneration. Now, here is the outline that I really think is the one that we need to follow, because this is the author's outline. And when you look at the author's outline, the author's Moses, he organizes it generations of. And as you can see, it's pretty extensive. Now, you have the creation narrative, okay, from chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3. Then you have the generations of the heavens and the earth. Now, that's his title, the author's title. Chapter 2, verse 4 through 426. Then you have the generations of Adam, the generations of Noah, the generations of the sons of Noah, and then in particular, the generations of Shem. That's important because the Jews come as descendants of Shem. Then the generations of Terah, that's that's Abraham's father. The generations of Ishmael, the generations of Isaac, the generations I mentioned earlier of Esau, and then finally the generations of Jacob. Now I think that's significant because to a Jew, blood is everything. It's really important. Some of you are really fascinated with genealogies. Others could care less. You have to understand that the Jews were obsessed with genealogy. It was very important to them to know who grandpa and great-grandpa and way on back was, because their identity very much centered in the tribe that they were from. I mean, Saul, the apostle, what tribe's he from? What tribe's he from? Y'all, I'm so disappointed in you. Come on. Huh? Benjamin, there we go. He's from the tribe of Benjamin. How did he know that? It had to be because they had kept track and kept records, right? For hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. For him to know, because he's an exile, man. He grows up in Tarsus of Cilicia. All right? And yet he knows that he's a Benjamite. They kept track. They paid attention. That was very important to them. And so as Moses is writing Genesis, the focus on generations why did he organize it in this way? Because to the Jews, tracking that bloodline is incredibly important. Now, one of the fascinating things about this, and I don't want to get sidetracked too much, is notice how quickly the focus in Genesis narrows to the descendants of Jacob, and focus comes on the tribe of Judah. Now, Jesus was from what tribe? Now, you better get this one right. He was from the tribe of Judah. Right. He was from the tribe of Judah. Now, how does Moses, 1,500 years before Jesus is born, know that focusing on the tribe of Judah is going to be really important 1,500 years later, because that's the line Messiah is going to come from? Don't tell me there's not a divine mind behind this book, arranging this material and putting it together. Because the focus narrows too quickly, it's too specific to be accidental. There's a zillion different ways, you know that the Bible could have gone as far as tracking who's important and what's reported and this kind of thing. And that focus on Abraham and his descendants, and then ultimately on the tribe of Judah, King David, and so on, man, that can't be accidental. All right, God is directing that and guiding that as He's giving information that will ultimately lead to the coming of Messiah and the fulfillment of that promise is made in Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15. Questions? Okay. Now, let me go into a little detail here, a little bit about some ways that you can also kind of break the book up and look at the book of Genesis. You have antediluvian and post-diluvian periods. Now that's simply fancy terms for pre-flood and post-flood. Okay? The antediluvian and post-diluvian make reference to periods before and after the Noahic flood. And so antediluvian would be before the events starting in Genesis 6, and the post-diluvian would be basically chapter 9 and so on. Major characters. There are 6 major patriarchal figures in the book of Genesis. And one of the ways to outline the book, in my mind, is to just think about how the book focuses on these 6 characters: Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. Now, the vast majority of the material is going to center around the lives of those 6 individuals. Now, will there be peripheral characters that will be discussed and looked at and talked about? Certainly. Okay? You've got, for instance, Cain and Abel. Chapter 38 will be devoted to the mess that Judah will make in his life. And you are going to have other accounts of individuals within the book. But overall, those 6 guys will be the major focus of the book of Genesis. And again, their stories are important because they're centering around how God is going to fulfill that promise made in Genesis 3:15. Now, geography. Most of the events that are recorded in Genesis are going to occur in what we generally call Palestine. Okay? And so it will be that territory on the eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea. If you look at it, a relatively small geographic area where the vast majority of the incidents will take place. Now, it will reach as far east as the shores of the Persian Gulf, because Abraham will come from Ur of Chaldees. That's over on the Persian Gulf. That's a long ways away. And Abraham will go down, and so will, of course, Jacob and his family to Egypt, right? And so it'll go as far south as Egypt. But the vast majority of what takes place will occur in that relatively small geographic area that will ultimately be known as the Promised Land. Okay, any questions or comments about this? All right, Genesis will be known as the book of beginnings. Just notice the first here with me. You have the first of each part of God's creation. By the way, it's real interesting. When you look at the creation account in Genesis 1, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved over the surface of the waters. Okay? The earth was without form and void. When you actually look at the creation account, one of the things that really fascinates me is that most of it has to do with God creating order out of chaos. The material's already there. The land's there, the water's there, all that's there. He's just dividing and shifting and shaping and molding, and he's bringing order out of chaos. The actual creation of animals, the creation of man, most of the creating is done early on, and it's shaping and molding that creation. And I just think that's interesting, because if you look at our lives, isn't so much of our life really trying to bring order out of chaos? Seriously, we spend a great deal of our lives trying to bring order out of chaos. In fact, how long will we remain alive if we didn't bring order out of chaos? And so, God functioning in the way that he does as far as structuring creation and ordering creation, to me is really interesting to look at look at it in those terms of creating and then shaping and molding and bringing order. Now, you find in chapter 3 the first sin, which is what? Yeah, don't eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And what do? She eats, hands it to him, and he eats, and you find then the first sin occurring. Associated with that, and not accidentally, by the way, the first punishment. Early on, what's God want you to know? Sin has consequences. If you breach my law, there are penalties that will occur. Things are going to happen that you're not going to like. And I think it's to me, again, it's very enlightening that very early on, you've just barely got past creation, you've got them in the garden, and bam, here's sin and here's punishment. He wants you to know. I mean what I say when I tell you not to do certain things. Okay? It will extract a cost if you do. The first lie in chapter 3. What's the first lie? No, it ain't the woman made me do it. Y'all, come on. That's right. It is Satan telling him what? Oh, you can go ahead and eat it, it'll be fine. You know, you're not going to die. You're going to be like God, knowing good and evil. Okay? There's the lie. There's the lie. That's the first lie. And that's why later Jesus will call him the father of lies, right? Because he's the first liar. Then, of course, the first murder. And see, here's another one that just, wow. Why does he put that in there? Why does God have Moses tell you about Cain and Abel? It's not very complimentary to human beings at all. I mean, he's just stuck us in the garden. We have come out of the garden. We're just getting started. Some of the very first human beings ever to inhabit the face of the earth. And what are we doing? Murdering each other. Out of what? Envy? Pride? Whatever it might be. Remember that warning, sin's lurking at the door? Be very, very careful. Serious sin by chapter 4. The first sacrificial offerings. Cain bringing what? Grains that he's grown, right? Crops that he's raised. And Abel bringing what? Abel bringing the first fruits of his flock. Okay? Bringing an animal sacrifice, a blood sacrifice. Now, here you go again with all this stuff that we don't know. Why are they doing that? What have they been told? What command has been given to them? See, we don't know. But are they acting according to a directive that's been given to them? I would argue pretty strongly, yes, they are. God has told them to bring of what they have. And because he rejects Cain's sacrifice like he does, I've got to believe that he's made specific what will be clear in the law, and that is, I want blood offerings. Why? Because sin kills. Sin kills. And early on, I want you to recognize sin kills. I want you to watch innocent animals die. I want you to watch their eyes glaze over. I want you to hear that last breath that they draw. I want you to see the death struggle, because I want you to understand the price that sin extracts. Sin kills. And so early on, blood offerings are required, and Cain violates that. And God rejects his offering and it ticks him off. And here you go with, I can't beat up God, but I can kill my brother. And so that's what he does. I think he's rebelling against God. But it's Abel who pays the price because he kills Abel. But there you find early on, sacrificial offerings. The first polygamist in chapter 4, you've got Lamech. Remember, Ada and Zillah, he's got a couple of wives, and he's bragging about, boy, if anybody messes with me, I'll kill him. He'll regret ever messing with me. The inclination toward violence indicated very, very early on in the case of Lamech. The first city built by whom? Huh? Cain. And by the way, and we've talked about this before, ain't that interesting? Why is what has God told him? You go back and look at that real quick. In Genesis 4, God has told him, you're going to be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth. Verse 12 of chapter 4. A fugitive and a wanderer. And what does Cain do? Oh, no, I won't. I'll build a city. Name it Enoch. I'll show you. You can't tell me what to do. Now he whines about his punishment. Okay, and God promises him nobody's going to kill you because he says somebody's going to kill me, and he whines about that. But bottom line, he's just like this with God. You're telling me I'm going to be a fugitive and a wanderer in the earth, and I'm telling you no, sir. And the first city is built in rebellion against God. And as we've talked about before, I am absolutely convinced that one of the reasons we have the problems that we do in our cultures around the world today is because we have these pus pockets that are huge cities. You look at where the problems come in cultures. You look at where there's violence, where there's evil centered, and again, it's going to be in the huge mega cities on this earth. There's a very real sense in which they are a symbol of man's rebellion against God. We're going to cluster together. We're going to build a tower up to heaven. We're going to cluster together, and we're going to be able to take care of ourselves. We'll build tall enough walls. We'll have flush toilets. We'll have fresh water. We'll have electricity. We'll have all the conveniences that we need and all the protection we need. And in the process of that, oh, by the way, we don't need God. And what do we end up with? The kind of messes that we have today. First city is built with, I believe, a fist being shaken in the face to God by Cain. The first poetry is found in chapter 4. Poetry will permeate the Old Testament. It's hard for us to pick up on it because when you translate from one language to another, it's really hard to catch that a lot of the time. But there's a tremendous amount of material in the Old Testament, especially in the prophets, that is poetic in nature. It's not just Psalms that's poetry. There's a lot of the Old Testament that's structured in a poetic way. And then I would just challenge you to trace through the book and compile your own list as far as first. I mean, there's just a ton of first when you look at the book of Genesis. It is indeed a book of the beginnings. It's also a book of prophecy. And interestingly, and very importantly, I think also, it is a book of providence as well. Of prophecy, you have the prophecy of Messiah. We've already mentioned that, Genesis 3:15. That prophecy reiterated that through Abraham's seed all the nations of the earth will be blessed. In 22:18, again in 49:10, at the death of Jacob and the blessings that are being given at that point. You have the prophecy of the nation of Israel, that from Abraham will come this great nation. Of Israel's enslavement in Egypt prophesied in chapter 15 and verse 13. The fascinating prophecy, the birth of Isaac. Remember, he is the son of promise. Abraham's tried to fix it for God. God's promised him a son. It hadn't come. And so what's he do? Takes Hagar, has Ishmael, makes a mess, right? And God comes to him and he says, you're going to have a son. I'm too old. Mama's too old. This can't happen. Remember, Mama laughs. She laughs. And she gets called on it. And then she gets to name her son what? God has a sense of humor. She laughs. And when that boy's born, she names him laughing. His name's Isaac, which means laughing. So you laughed, ha ha ha. Who gets the last laugh? Okay. You had that son that I promised you were going to have. Okay. Of the destinies of the 12 tribes, that's fascinating, 49. As Jacob is talking to the sons, and he's saying, okay, Reuben, you messed up, so sorry, you're not going to get the place that you would get otherwise as firstborn. Okay? Simeon, Levi, you messed up too because of the mess you made when your sister was raped and what you did, the violence that you brought. And so who becomes the one through whom the seed line will be traced? Not Reuben, not Simeon, not Levi. You go to the fourth son. You go to Judah. Now, ain't that interesting? Because Jesus is going to come from what tribe? Come from the tribe of Judah. Why is Judah given the preeminence? Clear back here in chapter 49 of Genesis. Again, divine mind. Divine mind right in this book. Okay, providence. In the life of Abraham. In chapter 12, remember, he runs down to Egypt. And Pharaoh puts his eye on Sarah. And God lets Pharaoh know you leave her alone. Abraham lies about his relationship. Remember? Well, she's my sister. Well, yeah, she is his half-sister. She's also his wife. But he's going to come out of that a rich man. God's going to protect him. He lied. He made a mess. God's watching over him. God's protecting him. God's providence is working. When he goes back up to the promised land, he is wealthy because Pharaoh's made him wealthy. God's been watching out for him. You see providence in the life of Isaac and finding a wife for him. Providence in the life of Jacob over and over again. Is God watching out for that character? I mean, he's a liar, right? And he's a manipulator and all. And is God, in spite of his character, watching out for him and blessing him and helping him along the way? Yes, he is. Which I think is an important reassurance to us. Because I think we go, well, I'm not deserving of God protecting me and God watching out for me. Well, you read the Old Testament, it ain't a matter of you being worthy. It's a matter of God's grace, of God watching out for his children and caring for them. And he certainly watches out for Jacob in spite of Jacob's major character flaws. And then, of course, providence in the life of Joseph. Remember how his brothers sell him as a slave? And he's taken down to Egypt, and he's sold to Potiphar, and he'll work in Potiphar's house until Potiphar's wife accuses him of attempted rape, and he gets himself thrown in jail. And by the way, I think we've talked about this, I think that tells you right there, Potiphar doesn't believe his wife. Because if he believed his wife, I guarantee you Joseph's a dead man. You're not going to throw him in prison. You're going to kill him. He didn't kill him because I know he knows Joseph's character. He knows the kind of man he is. But what's he going to do? Because you see, if he accuses his wife of lying, all kinds of complications and implications in that. And so I think he kind of seeks the easiest way out, which is not that easy for Joseph, but it's to throw Joseph in prison. And so that's what he does. But you see God working in Joseph's life the whole time. Oh man, he gets thrown in prison. Yeah, he gets thrown in prison. Why? Well, because in prison, he's going to get to meet the butler and the baker, isn't he? Of Pharaoh. Well, what's the big deal about that? Well, because that butler ultimately is going to remember what Joseph had prophesied to him. And he's going to tell Pharaoh, when Pharaoh's having these dreams that are troubling him, you need to check with this kid that I met when I was in prison. He did some amazing things. And Joseph will end up the second most powerful man in all of Egypt because he got thrown in prison. Because if he hadn't been thrown in prison, he never would have met those two guys. And there's no way that some kid who is a Hebrew and his people keep sheep, and remember, Scripture's very specific in Genesis, the Egyptians don't like shepherds. Okay, they don't like people who keep sheep. They look down on that. There is no way this kid would ever stand in the presence of Pharaoh were it not for God working it out for him to be able to be where he is. Now, who would have ever figured that out? Only God could make that work like it did. But God is working to put Joseph in the position for Joseph to be able not only to save his family, but to save that whole part of the world, because Egypt would have crashed on the rocks, wouldn't it? Had it not been for Joseph's foresight and laying up all that grain during the 7 years of plenty before the famine came. And so God is working providentially in Joseph's life all the way through that situation. There's some major covenants that are established in Genesis. There is that unconditional covenant never to destroy the earth again with a flood. I always think, how did Noah and his wife and his sons and their wives react to the first thunderstorm that came up? Do you think there was a little PTSD there? When it started rumbling and raining and carrying on, I mean, after what they've been through, oh no, here we go again. And so what's God do? He says, I assure you, this will not happen again. The earth is never going to be destroyed again with the flood. Okay? I'm not going to do that. And the symbol is the rainbow. Because when you go back and you look at these covenants, invariably when these covenants are made, there's a symbol that's attached to the covenant. That's often overlooked, but that's very much the case in these covenants. And so the covenant's the rainbow. Then God's covenant to give to Abraham's descendants the land, and the size of the land from the river of Egypt to the south to the great river, the Euphrates, to the north. Okay? That's quite a stretch of country. If you'll take a look at it. That's from the Sinai Desert clear up into the Mesopotamian area. All right? Genesis 15. Now, the symbol, this is an interesting one, because this is this eerie thing that happens in 15, where in the dark, remember these torches come by, and he's cut these animals in half, and he walks down in between the halves, okay? And God's making this covenant with him about his people. It's kind of an eerie thing that's going on here. But clearly a point's being made. I'll keep my covenant with you if you keep your covenant with me. And if you don't, there's a half a cow here and half a cow here, and you get the idea. You'll pay a price if you don't stay faithful. But that covenant that's established in 15, the symbol is this torch passing between the halves. And then you get to the covenant of circumcision in 17. Very significant. The covenant of circumcision, because the symbol is God's mark in the flesh, delineating those who are in covenant with him. And that's a big, big deal to the Jews. And it's not just a big, big deal to the Jews, it's a big deal to God. You want to know how big a deal it is. What happens to Moses when he doesn't circumcise his sons. You remember that incident in Exodus where it looks like Moses' life is going to be forfeit until his wife steps in to see that the boys are circumcised. Okay? God driving home a point. I mean it about this covenant being marked in the flesh of the male. Okay, you are going to keep the covenant of circumcision. And so again, that's the delineation that you are my children. And that mark in the flesh is that circumcision. That's why, again, the Old Testament, they're going to talk about the uncircumcised, the uncircumcised. Okay, because the uncircumcised means what? That you're not in covenant with God. Okay? Now, two mysterious characters. They're introduced in Genesis, and these guys fascinate me because it makes me wonder how many others are we not told about? I mean, we're told about these two, but how do we know that there weren't a bunch of others besides just these two, and we're told about these two? Enoch. He's mentioned in chapter 5, verses 20 through 24, as God is giving you the generations of Adam and tracing through Seth and so on. And in the language of 524 would seem to indicate that Enoch was not why? For God took him. God took him. Now, what's the backstory on that? We have no idea. I mean, seriously, think about it. Did Enoch just not show up one day and they couldn't find him anywhere? And they finally decided God must have taken him? Seriously, is he sitting and eating with his family and suddenly he's not there? Because God took him? You know, is he in a crowd of people and they're meeting and they're talking and all of a sudden, psh, and he just disappears? Is he registering his distaste and his anger and his heartbrokenness at the evil and the violence that's filling the earth? Is he kind of preaching a sermon to a bunch of unbelievers and all of a sudden, bam, he's just gone because God took him? See, we don't know. You can create all kinds of scenarios. But the fact of the matter is, I think it's a clear message to the antediluvian people that God's paying attention to how they are not behaving themselves. And when you have a man like Enoch who is behaving himself, obviously he is, and who is walking with God, and suddenly God takes him, what's the message to the rest of the world? Judgment's coming. And judgment will come, won't it? It will come. And so Enoch and Elijah are going to share this unique distinction of never seeing death, of being taken up to heaven. Elijah, remember, in the fiery chariot and all. And again, we're not told about the circumstances for Enoch, just that this happens. But I think this is very significant. And again, are there other Enochs back there that we just don't know about? See, could be, don't know. This is the Enoch in the line of Christ. That's why we know about him. Now, fascinating guy, Melchizedek. Mentioned in chapter 14, verses 18 through 20. Remember, this is in the context of Abraham having fought this battle against these Mesopotamian kings. And he's victorious, and he comes back, and he takes 10% of what he has taken in battle, and he takes that and he gives that to Melchizedek. Now, what's that tell you about Melchizedek? It tells you that he is in a position of great power and respect, doesn't it? if Abraham is paying taxes to this guy, or royalties, or whatever you want to call them here, and there's no indication that Melchizedek has demanded this. He may have, but it doesn't say that. But he's taking a significant portion of this and he's taking it to Melchizedek, who is identified as the king of Salem. That will later be Jerusalem. This is way prior to it being Jerusalem. Okay, this is just Salem at this point. And significantly, priest of God Most High. Does God have priests prior to the Levitical priesthood? Yes, he does. Are there individuals serving as priest of God during the time of the patriarchs? Yes, there are. Why don't we know more about them? Because God chose not to tell us more about them. Just to let us know they existed. And they were men of renown, men of great power, great influence. The writer of Hebrews will make the point, hey, it is the lesser paying tribute to the greater, when Abraham brings his tribute to Melchizedek. Now the psalmist will allude to him in Psalm 110 verse 4, and then the writer of Hebrews very significantly will use the priesthood of Melchizedek as a type of the priesthood of Jesus in Hebrews chapter 7. And so this relatively obscure figure is seen as representative in a sense as the type ultimately of Christ in his priesthood. But a fascinating insight into the fact that God isn't just working in the life of Abraham. And a lot of times I think that we think, well, God's just working with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. No, he's not. No, he's not. Now that's the narrative that's traced in the Bible. But that's not all that God's doing. Is God working through Melchizedek? He sure is. What did God accomplish through him? I don't know, but a bunch. Later on, you'll have Balaam the prophet. He's not a Jew. Okay? Is he a prophet of God? Yes, he is. Is God speaking directly to him? Yes, he is. Is he hundreds of miles away from the promised land? Yes, he is. But he's a prophet of God. And so does God have prophets outside of his chosen people at that time? Yes, he does. So is God working among his people? Yes, he is. Is he working outside of his people? Yes, he is. But the narrative here is just focused on his people, chosen people, not focused on what he's doing with everybody else. And so, I think we make a big mistake when we limit God to just this and fail to see that he's big God who can do big things, and he is. And he's working in all kinds of ways, okay, through this. A little bit about Genesis, okay? God bless.